My daughter put a tracker in my purse for my safety. I found it, smiled, and took it on. A very interesting trip. The next morning, she called screaming.
Hi, I'm Grace. Quick question. If your kids secretly tracked your GPS, would you be thankful or furious? Tell me below. Today's story is about Doris and how she taught her daughter a lesson she'll never forget.
You were in Atlantic City? At a casino? At 11 o'clock at night? That's how my daughter greeted me at 7:15 in the morning, her voice so sharp it could have cut through the phone line itself. No, good morning, Mom. No, how are you feeling? Just accusations wrapped in capital letters. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the wallpaper orange, and I smiled. Actually smiled, because for the first time in 3 years, I knew something she didn't know I knew. Good morning, Sandra, I said, keeping my voice as flat as week old soda. Don't you good morning me. I've been worried sick. Your location was all over the place yesterday. And then at night? A casino? Mom, have you lost your mind? Are you gambling now? Is this some kind of breakdown? I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was the cheap, instant kind. Sandra always said I should switch to those fancy pods, but I never liked the taste of anything that came out of a machine that cost more than my first car. The coffee was bitter and lukewarm, just the way I accidentally make it every morning. Some habits you don't outgrow. Sandra, I said, how do you know where I was last night? The silence on the other end lasted about 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, I could practically hear her brain scrambling for a lie that would stick. I've heard that silence before. When she was 16 and I found cigarettes in her jacket. When she was 23 and I asked about the dent in the car. The silence of someone caught with their hand in the cookie jar. The family sharing app. On your phone. You know, the one Greg set up for emergencies. My phone was home all day yesterday, charging on the kitchen counter. I didn't take it with me. Another pause. Longer this time. I heard Greg's voice in the background, muffled, asking what was wrong. Then how... The tracker, Sandra. The one you sewed into the lining of the purse you gave me last month. The one you said was a gift because my old one was falling apart. I found it 6 days ago. She didn't say anything. I heard Greg again, his voice sharper now, closer to the phone. She must have put it on speaker without telling me. That's just like them. Always listening, never announcing. I didn't go to Atlantic City, I continued, stirring my coffee even though I take it black. Old habits. My friend Marge did. She took my purse on the senior bus trip. I asked her to. I wanted to see what you'd do. Mom, and now I know. I hung up before she could say anything else. Not dramatically. My generation doesn't do dramatic hang-ups. We just quietly end the conversation and go back to our crossword puzzles, which is exactly what I did. 14 across. Type of control that seems caring, but isn't. 7 letters. I filled in coerced and moved on. Let me back up a bit because this story didn't start with a tracker. It started with a handbag. And before that, it started with my husband dying. And before that, it started with me being the kind of mother who never learned to say no. Maybe it started even earlier than that. Maybe it started the day I was born, in a generation that taught girls to be pleasant above all else. My name is Doris Brennan. I turned 71 last March, though Sandra forgot to call until 2 days later. Said she'd been swamped at work, which is funny because she's a real estate agent, and March is notoriously slow. But who's counting? Well, I am. I'm counting. I've lived in the same house in Maple Falls, New Jersey, for 43 years. My husband Walter and I bought it when the neighborhood was still considered up and coming, which was realtor talk for, you might get mugged, but the mortgage is reasonable. The sellers were an elderly couple moving to Florida. The husband had emphysema, the wife had dreams of beaches. They took a lower offer from us because they liked that we were newlyweds. Start fresh here, the woman told me, pressing the key into my hand. Make it yours. We did. We painted every room ourselves that first summer. Walter on the ladder, me holding it steady because he was always a little wobbly with heights. We fought about the color of the bathroom. He wanted blue, I wanted green. We compromised on a shade that was neither and both, and somehow perfect. We paid off that house in 28 years. Double shifts, coupons, the whole 9 yards. Walter worked at the post office. I was a secretary at Roosevelt Elementary for 30 years. Typed report cards, answered phones, put Band-Aids on skinned knees, and learned the names of 4,000 children who are now adults with children of their own. Some of them still wave at me at the grocery store. Last week, a woman in her 40s stopped me near the produce section and said, "Mrs. Brennan, you called my mom when I was sick in 2nd grade. She always said you were the nicest person at that school." I didn't remember the call, but I remembered the girl. Red braids, missing front tooth, terrible at math but wonderful at art. Walter died 4 years ago, in the garage. He was fixing the lawnmower, the same one he'd been about to replace since 2011, and his heart just stopped. No warning, no goodbye, no last words. I found him when I went out to call him for lunch. Meatloaf, I remember. He loved my meatloaf, even though I always made it too dry. He'd drown it in ketchup and say it was perfect. He was lying on the concrete floor, the wrench still in his hand. His eyes were open. I called 911, even though I knew. 30 years working in a school office, you see enough emergencies to recognize when someone is past helping. The paramedics were kind. The police were gentle. The funeral home was efficient. And then, suddenly, I was alone in a house that had never felt empty before. After the funeral, Sandra showed up at my door with casseroles and condolences, and for a few weeks, I thought maybe grief would bring us closer. It didn't. What it brought was questions. "Mom, do you know where Dad kept the insurance papers?" "Mom, did Dad ever mention anything about investments?" "Mom, what's the situation with the house? Is there still a mortgage?" "No. How are you holding up?" "No. Do you need me to stay the night?" "Just inventory." That was the first crack, though I didn't see it then. I was too busy being grateful she was there at all. When you're 71 and your husband dies with a wrench in his hand and you find him cold on the concrete, you don't notice the vultures circling. You just notice that someone is holding your hand at the funeral. You don't ask why they're squeezing so hard. Her husband, Greg, and I use the word husband loosely because he's really more of a financial advisor who happens to share her bed. He started asking questions about 6 months later. Subtle at first. "Just curious, Doris. What's the property tax situation like here? Must be through the roof." And then less subtle. "You know, a house this size for one person. Have you thought about downsizing? Market's hot right now. You could make a killing." I should have told him to mind his own beeswax. That's what my mother would have said. Mind your own beeswax, Greg, and go count someone else's money. Instead, I made him coffee. The good kind, from the French press Walter bought me for our anniversary, and explained that I wasn't interested in selling the house where I'd raised my daughter, buried my cat, kissed my husband goodbye every morning, for 4 decades, and learned how to be myself. He nodded like he understood. But I saw the look he gave Sandra across the kitchen table. The kind of look that says, "We'll try again later." They always tried again later. That's the thing about people like Greg. They have patience for the long game. They chip away at you slowly over months and years until you start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you are too old for this house. Maybe you do need help. Maybe you are becoming a burden. But I'm getting ahead of myself. A year after Walter died, Sandra sat me down at her fancy granite countertop. The one I helped pay for, by the way, $8,000 toward the kitchen renovation, because Greg said it would increase the resale value, and slid a piece of paper across to me. "It's just a precaution," she said. "Power of attorney. In case something happens to you and we need to handle things quickly. Medical decisions, bills, that kind of stuff." I picked up the document and tried to read it. The font was small, the language was legal, and my reading glasses were at home on my nightstand where I'd left them. "I can barely see this," I said. "It's just standard boilerplate, Mom. Everyone does it at your age." "You don't want to end up incapacitated with no one able to make decisions for you." Incapacitated. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. I should have read every word. I should have taken it to a lawyer, Martin Nowak, Walter's old friend, who'd done our wills years ago. But I was tired and lonely, and she was my daughter, and she said, "Don't you trust me, Mom?" So I signed it. I've replayed that moment 100 times since then. The pen in my hand, a cheap ballpoint, the kind that skips, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead, the kind that makes everyone look sickly, Sandra's smile, which I now realize didn't quite reach her eyes, Greg in the next room, pretending to watch TV but really listening to every word. That piece of paper gave her access to my life in ways I didn't understand at the time. It was supposed to be for emergencies, but for Sandra and Greg, my entire existence started to feel like an emergency they needed to manage. Let me tell you about the small things, because that's where control hides. It doesn't march in wearing jackboots and demanding surrender. It tiptoes in wearing slippers and carrying casserole dishes. It speaks in soft voices and calls itself concern. First, there was the phone. Last Christmas, Sandra gave me a new smartphone because my old flip phone was embarrassing. "It's got family sharing," she explained, setting it up for me while I sat at her dining table eating cookies I hadn't asked for. "So if you ever get lost or have an emergency, we can find you." I thought that was sweet. What mother wouldn't want her daughter to be able to find her in an emergency? I pictured myself collapsed on the sidewalk, clutching my chest, while Sandra heroically tracked my location and sent help. What I didn't know was that family sharing also meant she could see every appointment I made, every store I visited, every time I left the house and how long I stayed. When she asked me, weeks later, how was Dr. Milstein? A cardiologist I'd seen for a routine checkup. I was confused. I hadn't told her about the appointment. "I saw it on the calendar," she said, her voice light and casual, like this was normal. I didn't remember putting it on any calendar. I didn't even know how to put things on a calendar with that phone. But I let it go. Because what was I going to say? Stop knowing where I am? That sounded paranoid. That sounded ungrateful. Then there was the thermostat. Greg came over one weekend to help with some maintenance, which meant he fiddled with things that didn't need fiddling and broke things that weren't broken. He spent 20 minutes in the hallway with the new smart thermostat they'd insisted I needed, tapping at it with his phone like he was defusing a bomb. When he left, my house was set to 64 degrees. 64. In February. In New Jersey. "It's more efficient," Sandra explained when I called, shivering in my own living room, wearing 3 sweaters and still feeling the cold in my joints. "And honestly, Mom, You're always hot anyway. You're always opening windows and complaining about heat. That was true 30 years ago when hot flashes were ruling my life. Now I have arthritis. The cold makes my hands ache like someone's twisting them. My fingers stiffen, my knees lock up, my back seizes if I sit too long in a cold room. But I didn't argue. What was I going to do? Drive to her house and demand she change my thermostat? I just bought a space heater for the bedroom, the kind with the fake flames that Walter always said looked tacky, and paid the extra electric bill myself. Then there was the lock. One day, I came home from the library. I go every Tuesday. Have for 15 years. The librarians know me by name. And my key didn't work. Just didn't work. I stood on my own porch, fumbling with the lock like a burglar, while Mrs. Patterson from next door watched through her curtains. Turns out Greg had upgraded my locks for security and forgot to mention it. Sandra dropped off the new keys that evening, along with a lecture about how I really should have been answering my phone. We were worried, she said, standing in my doorway like she was inspecting the premises. What if something had happened? What she meant was, what if you'd gone somewhere we didn't know about? What if you'd done something without our permission? And then there was the mail. I've had the same mailbox for 43 years, the kind you have to turn the key twice to open, a quirk Walter never got around to fixing. Adds character, he used to say, like me. The key has a specific way it needs to be turned. First left past the click, then right until it catches. I've done it 10,000 times. I could do it blindfolded. A few months ago, I noticed the key was only turned once when I got home. Could have been a mistake. Could have been the mail carrier, though they've never had a key. But it kept happening. And always on days when something arrived from the bank or my insurance company. Sandra had a spare key to the mailbox for emergencies. I started keeping track in a little notebook, the kind of notebook school secretaries keep, lined, spiral-bound, dated entries. November 12th. Mail key turned wrong, bank statement arrived. November 18th. Mail key turned wrong, notice from doctor's office. November 24th. Mail key turned wrong, nothing important. I didn't say anything. What would I say? I think you're reading my mail? She'd call me paranoid. She'd use that word she likes so much, confused. That's the thing about getting older. People can take your whole life apart, piece by piece, and if you complain, they just sigh and say, "Mom, you're confused." They say it gently, patiently, like they're talking to a child. And after a while, you start to wonder if they're right. Maybe you are confused. Maybe you did leave the key turned wrong. Maybe you are losing your grip on things. But I wasn't confused. I was paying attention. There's a difference. The purse arrived on a Tuesday last month. Sandra came by unannounced. She had a key, of course, the upgraded one Greg had made, carrying a shopping bag from one of those department stores where everything costs too much and lasts half as long as it should. I was in the kitchen, drinking tea and doing the crossword puzzle. 9 across. What spiders do. I'd just filled in, wait. I got you something, she said, with that bright voice people use when they want you to be grateful before you even know what they're giving you. She pulled out a handbag. Black leather, gold clasps, very tasteful, very neutral, very not me. What's wrong with my old one? I asked. Mom, that bag is falling apart. The zipper's broken. I saw you fighting with it last week. The strap is fraying. You can't keep carrying that around. It looks like something from a thrift store. The bag she was talking about was a birthday gift from Walter, Our 40th wedding anniversary, actually. He'd mixed up anniversaries and birthdays, like he always did. 40 years, 40 roses, one bag to put them in, he'd said, which made no sense, but I loved him for the attempt. The bag wasn't fancy. Brown leather, simple design, made by some company that probably went out of business years ago. But it fit everything I needed, and when I held it, I could still smell his cologne on the strap. Or maybe I imagined I could. Either way, I wasn't ready to let it go. "I like my old purse," I said. Sandra sighed, her specialty, a sound she'd been perfecting since adolescence, and set the new bag on the table. "Just try it. For me. Please? It'll make me feel better knowing you have something nice." What I didn't notice was that she'd already taken my old purse from the coat hook in the hallway. When she left, it went with her, bundled into that same shopping bag like it was garbage. "I'll donate it," she said over her shoulder. "No point keeping junk around." Junk. 40 years of marriage reduced to junk. 50 years of memories tucked into a shopping bag and carried out the door. I used the new purse because I didn't have a choice. It was fine, functional. The leather was smooth and smelled like nothing. The clasps clicked efficiently. It held my wallet, my keys, my mints, my reading glasses. But it didn't hold anything else. About a week later, I was digging around for a mint at the bottom. I always keep mints in my purse, the soft kind that don't crack my teeth. And my fingers brushed against something hard, sewn into the lining. At first, I thought it was a manufacturer's tag or some kind of anti-theft device they forgot to remove at the store. But when I felt it more carefully, small, flat, smooth on one side, slightly raised on the other, I knew exactly what it was. I didn't cut it out. I didn't confront Sandra. I just sat there at my kitchen table, holding the purse in my lap like it was a dead animal. And for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't sad. I wasn't confused. I wasn't even angry, not really. I was done. You have to understand something about me. I spent 30 years in a school office. I've seen every kind of scheme, every kind of excuse, every lie a teenager ever invented. I once caught a kid forging his mother's signature by holding the note up to the light and seeing the pencil marks underneath. I've been sneezed on, cried on, screamed at by parents who thought their precious angel couldn't possibly have thrown a chair at a teacher. I've sat through budget meetings and union negotiations and fire drills that turned into actual fires. Nothing much surprises me anymore. What did surprise me was how calm I felt. For years, and I mean years, I'd been swallowing small humiliations like they were vitamins. The thermostat set to 64. The phone that tracked my every move. The questions about my bank account slipped into conversations like arsenic into tea. The way Greg looked at my house, measuring the rooms with his eyes. The way Sandra talked to me sometimes, slow and loud, like I was hard of hearing and slow in the head. I kept swallowing because I was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of losing my daughter. Afraid that if I pushed back, she'd stop coming around entirely, and then I'd have no one. Walter was gone. My sister Ellen was in Florida, too far to visit. My friends were dying off one by one. Clara from church last year, Betty from the bridge club the year before, like lights going out on a street at night. But sitting there with that tracker in my hands, I realized something. I was already alone. I'd been alone for a long time. The only difference was that now I had proof, and proof, as it turns out, can set you free. Marge Dempsey lives 2 streets over, in a yellow house with a porch that's been sagging since 1987. She's 74, widowed, Used to work as an ER nurse back when they still let you smoke in the break room. She's got a mouth on her like a sailor and a heart like a marshmallow, and she's never liked Sandra. Your daughter looks at people like they're furniture, she told me once, years ago, after some holiday dinner gone wrong. Like she's deciding which room to put them in and whether they match the decor. I was offended at the time. Now I think she was being generous. I called Marge that same day I found the tracker, my hands still shaking a little. Not from fear, but from something closer to excitement. The feeling you get when you finally see the whole board and realize you're not as out of the game as everyone thought. I need a favor, I said. A weird one. Weird is my middle name. Actually, it's Louise, but weird sounds better. Spill. I explained about the purse, the tracker, the phone app, the thermostat, the mail, all of it. Marge listened without interrupting, which is not her usual style. Usually, she's jumping in with comments and curses and opinions she never asked permission to share. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. That's some cold-blooded nonsense right there. I know. I mean, I knew Sandra was a piece of work, but a tracker? In your purse? Like you're a runaway teenager or a lost dog? That takes the cake. That takes the whole bakery. I know. So what do you want me to do? Slash her tires? I know a guy. Well, I know a guy who knows a guy. Same difference. No, nothing like that. The senior center's got that Atlantic City trip next week. The casino bus. You're going, right? Wouldn't miss it. Gonna lose $20 on the slots and eat my weight in crab legs. Why? I want you to take my purse with you. Pause. I could hear her processing, the gears turning. Your purse. The one with the tracker. Just toss it in your bag, carry it around, let it go wherever you go. I want to see what Sandra does when she thinks I'm in a casino at 11 o'clock at night. Marge started laughing. Not a polite chuckle. A full belly laugh that made me hold the phone away from my ear, the kind of laugh that makes you worry about someone's blood pressure. Doris Brennan, she said when she caught her breath. You sneaky old broad. You absolute devil. I'm in. I'm so in. This is the most fun I've had since Jerry died. I'm not trying to be fun. I'm trying to make a point. Oh, honey, you're going to make a point, all right. You're going to make it with a sledgehammer. The day Marge went to Atlantic City, I took the bus to Trenton. No phone. No credit card that Sandra might be monitoring. She'd talked me into adding her as an authorized user in case of emergencies. And I'd noticed some odd alerts about my spending patterns showing up on her phone. Just cash in my pocket, a ham sandwich in my bag, the new bag, the dumb bag, minus its tracker, and a list of things I needed to do. The bus was mostly empty. A young mother with 2 kids who wouldn't stop kicking the seat in front of them. An old man reading a newspaper. Actual paper, can you imagine? With glasses thick as bottle bottoms. A teenager with headphones so loud I could hear the bass line from 6 rows back. I watched New Jersey slide past the window. The strip malls, the housing developments, the highway overpasses graffitied with names I couldn't read. Walter and I used to drive this route to visit his mother in Trenton, back when she was alive. She made the worst apple pie in 3 counties, but we always told her it was delicious. That's what you do for family. You swallow what's bad and pretend it's good. Maybe that's where I learned it. Maybe I learned it too well. First stop in Trenton, the law office of Martin Nowak. Martin was Walter's college roommate, back before Walter dropped out to work for the post office because his father got sick and someone needed to pay the bills. They stayed friends for 50 years, the kind of friends who only see each other at funerals and poker games, but would take a bullet for each other anyway. Martin practiced family law until he retired. Divorces mostly, and the occasional custody battle. and when I called him the day after I found the tracker, he agreed to come out of retirement for one afternoon. "Walter would have wanted me to help," he said, his voice creaky with age but sharp underneath. "Besides, I never liked that son-in-law of yours. Shakes hands like he's gripping a dead fish. Never trust a man with a limp handshake." Martin's office was in his old firm's building, a dusty little room they let him use when he needed to pretend he was still working. File cabinets from the Reagan administration. A desk covered in papers no one would ever read. A photograph of his late wife on the wall, watching everything with kind, disapproving eyes. We got to work. First thing, revoke the power of attorney. Every copy, every filing, every trace of Sandra's control over my life. Martin drew up the papers. Standard language, he said. Nothing fancy, just a clear and complete revocation. And I signed them with a pen that didn't skip, on paper that felt substantial in my hands. "She can't do anything with the old one now," Martin explained. "Legally, it's void the moment you file this. Practically, it might take a few weeks for all the institutions to update their records, but I'll make some calls." Second thing, change the will. This was harder because I had to think about what I actually wanted. For years, I'd assumed everything would go to Sandra. She was my only child. What else would I do with it? Leave it to the cat? The cat died 3 years ago, but sitting there in Martin's office, watching the dust motes float in the afternoon light, I thought about my granddaughter. Jenna is 22. She's got her mother's eyes, that same sharp blue, but her grandfather's sense of humor. She calls me every Sunday, not because she has to, but because she wants to. We talk about nothing important. Her job at the bookstore, my crossword puzzle troubles, the ridiculous things we've seen on television. She never asks about my money. She never hints about the house. She just talks to me, like I'm a person. Last Thanksgiving, when Sandra and Greg were too busy with work obligations to visit, though I saw on Facebook later that they'd gone to Greg's brother's house instead, Jenna drove 4 hours from Philadelphia just to eat turkey with me in my kitchen. She brought a pumpkin pie from a bakery near her apartment. We ate it with our fingers, straight from the tin, and laughed about nothing. "I'd rather be here than anywhere," she told me, and I could tell she meant it. So the will now says this: the house and my savings go into a trust for Jenna. Sandra is not the trustee. That honor goes to Martin himself, God willing he lives long enough, and if not, to his daughter, who's also a lawyer. Sandra can't touch the trust at all. She can't contest it. She can't manage it. She can't help with it. The money goes to Jenna when she turns 25, or immediately if I die before then. Third thing, and this was Martin's idea. We set up the house in a special kind of trust that's nearly impossible to challenge on grounds of incapacity. Guardianship cases, Martin explained, leaning back in his chair with the look of a man who's seen too many ugly family fights. They're getting more common. Adult children claiming their parents can't take care of themselves. Sometimes it's legitimate, dementia, illness, genuine need for protection, but sometimes it's about money, I said. Sometimes it's about money. And the way they prove incapacity is by documenting patterns. The parent forgets appointments. The parent makes unusual financial decisions. The parent seems confused when questioned about their affairs. He gave me a significant look. Sound familiar? All those questions. All those concerned looks. All those moments when Sandra asked me something and then sighed at my answer, like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. They were building a case. Brick by brick, sigh by sigh, concerned question by concerned question. Getting ready for the day when they could walk into a courtroom and say, Your Honor, our mother is no longer competent to manage her own affairs. Well? Good luck documenting anything now. Before I left Martin's office, he looked me over with those sharp old eyes of his. Still clear despite the years, still seeing everything. Doris, he said, are you sure about all this? Once it's done, it's done. There's no going back. I thought about Walter, about the house we built together, about the daughter who used to bring me macaroni artwork and now brought me tracking devices. I'm sure, I said. Martin nodded. Walter would be proud of you. I hoped so. I really did. Here's something nobody tells you about getting older. Your body slows down, but your mind doesn't. Not really. The world just starts treating you like it has. People talk louder when they see gray hair, as if volume helps with comprehension. They finish your sentences, as if you've forgotten how to speak. They grab your elbow to help you across streets you could cross just fine without them. Thank you very much. They call you young lady in that jokey way that really means old woman, but I'm pretending not to notice. And God forbid you misplace your keys or forget a word. Suddenly, everyone's whispering about dementia and nursing homes. Sandra had been doing this for years. The slow slide from daughter to guardian, from respect to management. She didn't ask anymore. She informed. She didn't visit. She inspected. Last Christmas, the same one where she gave me the tracking phone, she walked through my house, opening closets. Just checking, she said, when I asked what she was doing. Making sure you're not hoarding. Hoarding. I had 3 boxes of Christmas decorations, a closet of winter coats, and a lifetime of photographs in albums on the shelf. That's not hoarding, that's living. But I didn't argue. I just stood there, watching her paw through my things, feeling smaller and smaller in my own home. Greg was worse, in some ways. At least Sandra pretended it was about love. Greg didn't bother pretending. He asked about the value of my furniture. He suggested I consolidate my bank accounts. Just for simplicity, Doris, it's easier when everything's in one place, and offered to help me set it up. He brought over brochures for retirement communities and left them on my kitchen table like he'd just happened to pick them up somewhere. They're very nice places, he said. Activities, social events, medical staff on call. You'd make friends. I have friends, I said. Of course you do. But wouldn't it be nice to have people your own age around? People who understand what you're going through? What I was going through was being patronized in my own kitchen. But I didn't say that. I just put the brochures in the recycling bin after he left and went back to my crossword puzzle. That's the thing about control. It's patient. It doesn't need to win today. It just needs you to lose a little, day after day, until there's nothing left to fight for. But I was tired of losing. The night before Marge's Atlantic City trip, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed. The same bed Walter and I shared for 40 years, the mattress still dipped on his side from decades of him sleeping in the same position, and stared at the ceiling. The house creaked around me the way old houses do at night, settling into itself like an old woman settling into a chair. I thought about Sandra. I didn't hate her. That was the strange thing. Even after everything, the tracker, the thermostat, the looks, the lies, the way she'd reduced my life to a series of problems to be managed, I didn't hate her. She was my daughter. I'd held her when she was an hour old, red and screaming and absolutely perfect. I'd stayed up with her through fevers and nightmares and teenage heartbreaks. I'd paid for her braces, her prom dress, her college, her wedding, the down payment on her house. You don't stop loving someone just because they disappoint you. Love doesn't work like a light switch. Flip it off and the room goes dark. It's more like a dimmer. It can go low, so low you can barely see by it, but it never quite goes all the way out. What I felt wasn't hate. It was something colder. Clarity, maybe. The kind of clear-eyed understanding you get when you finally stop making excuses for someone's behavior and just see it for what it is. Sandra wasn't a monster. She was just a person who'd learned that taking was easier than asking. And I was a person who'd taught her that by giving and giving and giving until she forgot there was ever another way. Well, time to unteach her. Marge texted me when she got on the bus to Atlantic City. Then again when she arrived at the casino. Then again at 10:47 p.m., along with a blurry photo of a slot machine with the caption, "Your purse just won $12. I laughed so hard, I woke up next door's dog. Sandra's call came at 7:15 the next morning, just like I told you at the beginning. After the initial screaming, the Atlantic City, the casino, the "have you lost your mind," there was a long, horrible pause. The kind of pause where you can hear someone rearranging their entire reality. The kind where you can practically see the gears grinding to a halt. You found the tracker. 6 days ago. Mom, I can explain. Can you? I'd love to hear you try. Another pause. I heard Greg's voice in the background. Sharper now. Something about lawyers and the situation. I heard Sandra shushing him, her hand probably over the phone, thinking I couldn't hear. But I could. Old people are always underestimated, even in our hearing. Sandra, I said, while you were tracking me at the casino, or what you thought was me, I was in Trenton, at a lawyer's office. Nothing. Not even breathing. The power of attorney is revoked. As of yesterday. Completely and permanently. You can't sign anything for me anymore. You can't access my accounts. You can't make decisions about my care or my property or my life. I heard Greg's voice rise, something that sounded like a curse word. And the will's been changed. The house and my savings go into a trust for Jenna. Not you. Not Greg. Jenna. You can't. I already did. It's filed. It's done. It's legal, binding, and completely impossible to challenge on grounds of incapacity, since I have a dated letter from my own doctor and Martin Nowak's sworn statement that I was of sound mind when I signed everything. I paused, letting that sink in. We thought of everything, Sandra. Funny how much time you have to think when people assume you're just sitting around waiting to die. There was a long silence. Then I heard crying. Sandra crying. That particular hiccuping sob she'd perfected as a teenager. The one that used to make me cave on anything. It didn't work anymore. This isn't fair, she finally said. We were just trying to help. We were worried about you. Were you worried about me when you set my thermostat to 64 degrees in February? Were you worried about me when you went through my mail looking for bank statements? Were you worried about me when you got rid of my husband's last gift and replaced it with a surveillance device? It wasn't surveillance, it was safety. It was control. And I'm done being controlled. I heard Greg grab the phone. His voice was different now. Not smooth, not friendly. Not the voice he uses when he's trying to sell you something. This was the real Greg, the one I'd glimpsed in 100 small moments over the years. Now listen here, Doris. Whatever you think you've done, we can undo it. Courts reverse these things all the time. If you were manipulated by some lawyer taking advantage of an elderly woman. Martin Nowak was Walter's best friend for 50 years. He's doing this as a favor. And the only person taking advantage of an elderly woman is you. That's slander. It's truth. And you know what they say. The truth will set you free, but first, it'll make you furious." I hung up. Then I poured myself another cup of coffee, put my feet up on the ottoman, and finished my crossword puzzle. They showed up that afternoon. Of course they did. Greg was carrying a folder. I could see it through the window as they walked up the path, bulging with papers, probably full of documents he wanted me to sign. New powers of attorney, maybe. Forms to undo everything I'd done. Sandra's eyes were red, but her jaw was set in that stubborn line I remembered from her teenage years, the look she got when she wanted something and had decided the world owed it to her. I didn't let them in at first, just stood in the doorway. "We need to talk about this," Sandra said. "We are talking. Inside, like a family. You stopped treating me like family when you put a chip in my purse. You started treating me like an asset to be managed. Like a problem to be solved." Greg stepped forward. "Mrs. Brennan, Doris, let's all calm down here. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Sandra was just worried about you. After everything that's happened, with Walter passing, you being alone in this big house, we just wanted to make sure you were safe." "Safe from what, Greg?" From accidents. Falls. Getting lost. You hear stories all the time. Elderly people wandering off, forgetting where they are. Getting lost? I've lived in this town for 43 years. I could walk to the post office blindfolded. I could give directions to the library in my sleep. I'm not wandering anywhere. You know what I mean? I know exactly what you mean. You mean you wanted to know where I was at all times. You wanted to monitor my movements. You wanted to make sure I wasn't doing anything with my money or my house that you hadn't approved first." He flinched. Just a little, just a tightening around the eyes. But I saw it. After 43 years of watching school children try to lie their way out of detention, I can spot a flinch at 50 paces. "This isn't about money," Sandra said, her voice rising. "Isn't it? Then why did I find an appraisal of my house in your garbage can 2 months ago? The one from Peterson Realty, with the little yellow sticky note that said, 'Good price, act soon.'" She opened her mouth, closed it. "Why does Greg ask about my savings every time he visits? Why did you try to get me to sign my house over to you just to simplify things last Thanksgiving? Why do you talk about my life like it's a project you need to wrap up?" Sandra looked at Greg. Greg looked at the ground. "I was trying to help," Sandra whispered. "No, you were trying to manage. There's a difference." I stepped back from the doorway. "You can come in, but we're going to have a real conversation. Not the kind where you tell me what to do. The kind where you listen." We sat in the living room, the same living room where Sandra used to play with her dolls, where Walter used to fall asleep watching football with his mouth open, where I'd spent countless evenings reading or knitting or just existing in the quiet of a house that knew me. Greg kept glancing at his folder. I could tell he wanted to open it, to turn this into a negotiation, to bring out whatever documents he'd prepared and explain why I should sign them. But I wasn't negotiating. "The tracker," Sandra started. "I know it looks bad, but I was genuinely scared. You're alone here. You're 71. What if you fell and no one knew? What if you wandered off somewhere? I have never wandered off in my life. But people your age, people my age are not all the same. We're not a category. We're not a demographic. I'm not your image of what an old woman should be. I'm me, Doris, the same person who raised you, who worked 30 years at the same job without missing a day, who paid off this house and helped pay for yours. I'm still here. I'm still competent. I'm still entitled to privacy." Sandra's eyes filled with tears again. Real tears this time, or close enough. I didn't mean to make you feel like a prisoner. Then why didn't you just ask? If you were worried, why didn't you say, "Mom, I'm worried. Can we figure something out together?" Why didn't you include me in decisions about my own life? Instead, you snuck. You tracked. You schemed. You treated me like I was already gone and you were just managing my estate. Because you never would have agreed. You're so stubborn. I'm stubborn because I've had to be. Because every time I try to make a decision for myself, someone swoops in to tell me I'm wrong. I'm not wrong, Sandra. I'm just old. And old doesn't mean incompetent. It doesn't mean invisible. It doesn't mean you get to take over my life because you've decided I can't handle it anymore. Greg cleared his throat. The throat clearing of a man who's about to say something reasonable sounding and completely self-serving. Look, we can argue about methods all day, but the bottom line is we care about you. And frankly, what you've done, changing the will, putting everything into a trust, cutting us out of decisions, that affects the whole family. That affects Jenna's future. Jenna is exactly who I'm thinking about. The trust is for her. But managed by strangers? This Martin Nowak, whoever he is. Martin Nowak is a man who loved my husband like a brother and has no interest in my money. Can you say the same? Greg's jaw tightened. The mask slipped, just for a second, and I saw something underneath. Not anger exactly, but frustration. The frustration of a man who'd been playing a long game and just realized he'd lost. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. That's what you don't seem to understand. My money, my house, my life, my mistakes." I could tell you the whole conversation, word by word, but it would take too long and most of it was just variations on the same theme. Sandra cried and accused and finally fell silent. Greg argued and justified and finally ran out of arguments. They left without opening the folder. At the door, Sandra turned back. "I love you, Mom," she said. It sounded almost like a question. "I love you too," I said. "That's why this hurts so much. Because I loved you enough to let you walk all over me for years. And now I love myself enough to stop." She didn't have an answer to that. Neither did Greg. They walked to their car and drove away, and I stood at the window watching until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat down in Walter's chair, and cried for an hour. Jenna came to see me that weekend. She'd heard the story from her mother, a much more dramatic version, I'm sure, full of maternal concern and ungrateful old women making terrible decisions. But she wanted to hear my side. We sat in the kitchen with tea and cookies, the good cookies I save for people I actually want to see. I told her everything: the tracker, the thermostat, the mail, the power of attorney, the look on Greg's face when he asked about family assets. All of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the kitchen table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm and strong, like Walter's used to be. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't know. I mean, I knew something was off. The way they talked about you sometimes like you were a problem to be solved. But I didn't know it was this bad. How could you? They were careful. And I was too proud to complain. You should have told me. I'm telling you now." She squeezed my hand. "What can I do? Just be yourself. Come visit when you want, not when you're told. Call me because you want to talk, not because you're checking in. Treat me like a person, not a patient. That's all I've ever wanted. Just to be seen." She smiled. She has a beautiful smile, Jenna does. It reminds me of Walter, the same crinkles at the corners, the same warmth behind it. I think I can manage that, she said. Before she left, she went out to her car and came back with a box. Inside was a new thermostat, a simple one with big buttons and a lock code that only I would know. "Greg's not touching this one," she said. "And if he tries, you call me, and I'll come over and remove his fingers." I laughed, actually laughed from somewhere deep. "You're a good kid, Jenna." I learned from the best. 3 weeks have passed since the Atlantic City incident. That's what Marge calls it now. The incident. And she tells the story to anyone who'll listen. The part where my purse won $12 on the slots has become $47 in her version. I don't correct her. It's a better story that way. Sandra has called twice. The first time she apologized. Sort of. It was one of those apologies that's really a justification. "I'm sorry you felt hurt, but you have to understand we were trying to help." I listened, said thank you, and didn't invite her over. The second time she asked if we could meet. "Somewhere neutral," she said. "A cafe. To talk about the future." I agreed. "We're supposed to meet next Thursday. I don't know what she'll say. I don't know if anything will change, but I'm not scared of the conversation anymore. For years, I dreaded confrontation because I thought it would mean losing her. Now I understand that you can't lose what was never really there. What I had wasn't a relationship. It was an arrangement, an understanding, a deal where I gave and she took and everyone pretended it was normal. What I have now is different, quieter, more honest. I have Marge, who would commit light felonies for me without asking questions. I have Jenna, who calls every Sunday and sometimes sends photos of the stray cat she's been feeding at her apartment. I have this house, paid off and protected, where every creak and shadow is familiar. And I have myself, Doris Brennan. 71 years old, widow, retired school secretary, terrible at poker but pretty good at keeping secrets. I went to the mailbox yesterday, the same mailbox Walter installed in 1981 with the key that has to turn twice. And for once, no one had tampered with it. Just bills, junk mail, and a postcard from my cousin Carol in Boca Raton. "Wish you were here," she wrote. "The weather is perfect, and the shuffleboard is surprisingly competitive." I stood there for a moment, holding the mail, looking at my house. The crooked step Walter always meant to fix. The roses by the porch, still blooming despite the late season. The window where I always stand to watch the sunset. Mine. All of it. Still mine. I walked back inside and closed the door behind me. Not slamming it, I'm not a door slammer, just clicking it shut, firm and final. The meeting with Sandra is tomorrow. I've been thinking about what I want to say, not the practical stuff. That's already been handled. Martin's paperwork is ironclad, and even Greg's lawyers would have trouble finding a loophole. The trust is protected. The will is clear. My life is my own again. No, I've been thinking about the other stuff. The harder stuff. I've been thinking about telling Sandra that I remember the day she was born. The way the nurse put her in my arms and she looked up at me with those big, confused eyes, like she wasn't sure what planet she'd landed on. I remember thinking, I will protect you from everything. I will give you everything. Maybe that was the first mistake. You can't protect someone from everything. And when you try to give them everything, they forget that anything has value. I've been thinking about telling her that I don't need an apology, not really. Apologies are just words, and words can be cheap. What I need is change. I need her to see me as a person, not a problem. I need her to knock before she enters my house and ask before she makes decisions about my life. I need her to understand that love and control are not the same thing, no matter how much easier it is to pretend they are. I've been thinking about telling her that I'm not cutting her out of my life. The door is still open, but it's my door now, and I decide who walks through it and when. I don't know if she'll hear me. I don't know if Greg will let her hear me, honestly. He has a way of getting between her and anything that might make her think independently, but I'm going to say it all the same. And if it doesn't work, if she walks out of that cafe and never looks back, then at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll know I spoke the truth instead of swallowing it like I've done for so many years. That's something. That's more than something. At my age, that's everything. Marge stopped by this afternoon with a casserole, her famous tuna thing with the crushed potato chip topping, the one Walter always pretended to like, and we sat on the porch watching the leaves fall. "You nervous about tomorrow?" she asked. "A little. Want me to come, hide in the bushes, signal you if she starts lying?" I smiled. "I'll be fine. I know you will." She patted my knee with her weathered hand. "You're the toughest old bird I know." Old bird? It's a compliment. Take it. We sat in silence for a while, watching a squirrel try to break into the bird feeder. He couldn't figure out the latch. Finally, he gave up and ran away, probably to plot his next attempt. "You know what I keep thinking about?" I said. "What?" "That tracker. It's still in the purse, in my closet." "You kept it?" "I don't know why. Proof, maybe, or a reminder." I paused, looking out at the yard Walter used to mow every Sunday. Sandra thought she was keeping tabs on me, but in the end, that little device told me more about her than she ever meant to reveal. Marge nodded slowly. "Funny how that works. Isn't it?" The sun was setting now, turning the sky that particular shade of orange that always makes me think of Walter. He would have pointed at it and said, "Hey, Doris, look at that." He noticed things like that. Sunsets. Birds. The way light fell through the kitchen window in the morning. I miss him. Every day, I miss him. But I'm not lonely anymore. Not the way I was. Lonely isn't about being alone. It's about being unseen. And for the first time in years, I feel seen. By Marge, by Jenna, by Martin, by myself. That's enough. It really is. So here I am, Doris Brennan, 71 years old, still standing. Tomorrow I'll meet my daughter at a cafe and try to rebuild something that maybe can't be rebuilt. Or maybe can. I don't know. The future is uncertain. But then again, it always was. I just used to pretend otherwise. What I know for sure is this. My house is mine. My money is mine. My decisions are mine. And nobody, not my daughter, not her husband, not anyone, gets to take those things from me just because they've decided I'm too old to deserve them. I survived 30 years of school children and their parents. I survived losing the love of my life. I survived 3 years of being slowly, quietly erased from my own existence. I can survive anything. The Thursday meeting came faster than I expected. Time does that when you're dreading something. Speeds up, refuses to give you space to breathe. I got to the cafe early. It was a little place on Main Street called The Percolator, the kind with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls, and a chalkboard menu that changes depending on who's working. Walter and I used to come here on Sunday mornings before church closed. They make good coffee. Real coffee. The kind that doesn't apologize for existing. I picked a table near the window where I could see the street. Old habit from school days. Always know who's coming through the door. I ordered tea, not coffee. My stomach was doing things that didn't need caffeine encouragement. Sandra showed up at exactly 2 o'clock. Not early, not late. The punctuality of someone making a point. She was alone. I'd half expected Greg to tag along, but maybe even he had the sense to stay home for this one. She looked tired, the kind of tired that makeup can't cover, the kind that comes from inside. For a moment, just a moment, I felt sorry for her. She was my daughter. I'd rocked her to sleep. I'd held her hair back when she was sick. I'd loved her before she was even born, when she was just a flutter in my stomach and a hope in my heart. Then I remembered the tracker, and the sorry feeling went away. She ordered coffee, black, no sugar, the same way Greg takes his, and we sat across from each other like two strangers who happened to share a face. "Thanks for meeting me," she said. "You asked. I came. I know you didn't have to." "No, I didn't." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, even though it must have been too hot to hold. Her knuckles were white. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About what you said. And... She took a breath. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know where to start. I keep going over it in my head, trying to figure out where it went wrong, and I can't. I can't find the moment where I turned into someone who puts trackers in her mother's purse." I let that sit. Didn't rush to fill the silence. 30 years of school administration teaches you the value of uncomfortable pauses. "It wasn't one moment," I finally said. "It was 1,000 small ones. Every time you made a decision about my life without asking. Every time you talked about me like I wasn't in the room. Every time you treated my house, my money, my future like they were already yours. I didn't mean... I know you didn't mean. That's almost worse. You didn't even notice you were doing it. It was just... normal. Expected. Like I was an obstacle to be managed instead of a person to be respected." She was crying now. Quiet tears. The kind that slipped down without sound. Part of me wanted to reach across the table and comfort her, the way I'd done 1,000 times when she was small. But I stayed where I was. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "Not yet. I know I haven't earned that. I'm asking if we can start over. Not pretend nothing happened, but actually start over. Where you're my mother and I'm your daughter, and that's it. No agendas, no plans. Just us." I watched her face, looking for the angle, the manipulation, the Greg-like calculation underneath. But all I saw was my daughter. Scared, sorry, and trying. "I'd like that," I said. "But there are conditions. Anything. You call before you visit. You knock before you enter. You ask before you assume. You treat my decisions like they belong to me, even if you don't agree with them. Yes. And Greg." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Greg stays out of my business. Completely. If I never discuss my finances with him again, that's fine by me. If he has concerns, he can write me a letter. I probably won't read it, but he can write it." Something flickered across her face. Not quite agreement. Not quite resistance. "He's my husband. And that's your business, but my money, my house, my life, that's my business. The two things don't overlap anymore." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll talk to him." "You do that." We sat there for a while longer, drinking our drinks, not really talking, but not fighting either. It wasn't reconciliation, Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. A door cracked open instead of slammed shut. When we left, she hugged me. Really hugged me. The way she used to when she was little, and I was the center of her world. I hugged her back, feeling her bones through her coat, remembering the baby she used to be. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. "I love you too," I said. That was never the question. I walked home instead of taking the bus. It was cold, but I didn't mind. The cold felt clean, honest. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. When I got home, Marge was sitting on my porch, wrapped in a blanket she'd apparently brought from her own house. "Well?" she demanded before I'd even reached the steps. "How'd it go? Do I need to slash tires or not?" I laughed, really laughed, the kind that comes from surprise. "No tires need slashing, at least not today." Damn it. I was looking forward to that. Maybe next time. I sat down next to her on the porch swing, and she shared her blanket. We watched the street together as the afternoon faded into evening. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know. I think so. I think I will be." "Good enough?" She patted my knee. "You know, when my kids pulled their nonsense, and they did, believe me, they did. Jerry used to say that family is like a garden. Sometimes you have to prune the dead branches to let the healthy ones grow. Jerry was a smart man. He had his moments, couldn't remember our anniversary to save his life, but he knew a thing or two about people." We sat there until the streetlights came on, one by one, like slow-motion fireflies. That was 2 weeks ago. Sandra has called 3 times since then. Real calls, not information-gathering missions. We talked about the weather. We talked about her work. We talked about Jenna's new apartment and the stray cat that might be moving in permanently. Normal things. Mother-daughter things. She hasn't mentioned the house or the will or the trust. Neither have I. Maybe someday we'll be able to talk about it without the wounds reopening. Maybe not. Either way, we're trying. Greg, from what I hear, is processing. That's the word Jenna used. Dad's processing everything. I imagine that means he's recalculating his expected retirement fund and coming up short. Poor Greg. Maybe he'll have to rely on his own financial planning instead of mine. Marge comes by every few days with food or gossip or both. Last Tuesday, she brought a whole pie. Apple, not her usual tuna casserole. And we ate half of it before dinner because we're 70+ years old and no one can tell us what to do. Jenna visits on Sundays. We've started doing crossword puzzles together, the hard ones from the Times. She's better at the pop culture clues. I'm better at the old-timey references. Between us, we usually finish. And me? I'm still here. Still standing. Still breathing. And if you're reading this, if you're somebody's mother or grandmother, sitting in a house that doesn't quite feel like yours anymore, answering questions that feel more like tests, watching your life get smaller and smaller because someone decided you needed managing, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not confused. You're not being paranoid. You're paying attention. And sometimes that's the first step. I'm not going to tell you what to do. God knows I've had enough of people telling me what to do, but I will say this. Whatever tracker they've put in your life, the real kind or the invisible kind, the one made of guilt or fear or obligation, you're allowed to take it out. You're allowed to take your life back. It's yours. It always was. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a thermostat to check. 68 degrees, minimum. And tomorrow I have a conversation to have and a life to keep living and maybe just maybe, a relationship to salvage. Or not. Either way, it's my choice. And that makes all the difference.
Dora showed her that being a mother doesn't mean losing your right to a private life. She finally took her power back. Thanks for hanging out with me today. You guys are amazing. You know, I was thinking, some people might say Doris was being petty. But honestly, I think it was the perfect way to show how disrespectful that tracking really was. Sometimes a serious talk just doesn't work, and you have to let people realize their own mistakes. What's your take? Was her casino prank the right move, or was it too much? Hit that like button if you're Team Doris. See you in the next one.